On today's American Football Stories episode, we'll recap this weekend's college football, including some great wins. We're going to talk about the Navy midshipmen and their huge comeback at Tulane. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game today with Coach Paint.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They're gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast, brought to you by Coach Paint. Today is September 20th, 2020. I'm Nick Knudsen, and I'm joined by my co-host, Robert Parker III. You ready to go, Rob?
Ready to go, Nick.
Another football weekend in the books. Let's jump into college football first, though. On Friday, September 18th, we had the Campbell Camels travel to Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina, once again, looks pretty good, running up the score to 43-21. Then we'll jump to Saturday here. No Thursday night game this week, obviously, in college football, since we jumped to Friday. So we'll follow along with the ranked teams first. But first, I want to do a new segment where we just acknowledge the games that were postponed or canceled that were on the schedule. So Charlotte, North Carolina was canceled. Postponed games include BYU at Army, Houston at Baylor, FAU at Georgia Southern, and Central Arkansas at Arkansas State. We'll continue to see this as the season goes. I think this is going to be part of the problem with the Big Ten's tight schedule. But we'll see how it goes, man. We'll see how it goes. So let's move on to Saturday's action. We'll start with the ranked teams. Trevor Lawrence went 8 of 9 for 168 yards and 3 touchdown passes before heading to the sidelines in the second quarter as number 1 Clemson rolled over the Citadel 49-0. USF traveled up to South Bend to play number 7 Notre Dame. The Bulls were handed a 52-0 donut. Notre Dame's offense took a while to get going against Duke last week, so it was good to see them to handle their business against a rebuilding USF. The Irish sprinted out to a 35-0 lead at the half and would end up putting up 429 yards of offense on the day in front of approximately 10,000 fans. USF struggled to do much on offense. They're only 2 for 15 on third down conversions and can only manage 105 yards on 33 rushing attempts. I was interested to see how first-year coach Jeff Scott's Bulls would handle this challenge, but it's clear they have a lot of work to do on the recruiting front. Scott's the right guy to get it done, but USF will probably have a few more of these blowouts heading their way in 2020. Rob, Notre Dame advances to 2-0. Their next games are at Wake versus FSU, versus Louisville, at Pitt, at Georgia Tech before facing Clemson on November 7th. I'm doing a look ahead here, but do you see any of those teams knocking off the Irish, or are we going to see a 7-0 Notre Dame team heading into Clemson in November?
Yeah, we might see a 7-0 team heading into Clemson. Once again, 52-0. Notre Dame kind of held South Florida with the donut and the goose egg for the day. Once again, we looked at Ian Book and 12 of 19 for 143 yards. They're not gaudy stats that you would like to see from your quarterback, but once again, they really didn't need him to throw the ball. The running game really took over in this Notre Dame rushing attack, and I think that's what you're going to see moving forward. Definitely Notre Dame racking up the yards on the ground.
Yeah, the Irish improved to 2-0. I look for them to get off to a fast start this season. I think we're looking at them as the clear second-best team in the ACC right now, but they'll get a chance to prove it in early November. All right, let's go out to the Big 12, number 11, Oklahoma State. Barely scraping by Tulsa. This was a rescheduled game from last week due to COVID concerns. Tulsa played tough. We saw that from a few other AAC teams, the American Athletic Conference, #P6 for you AAC fans. Okie State only managed 3 points in the first 3 quarters, but then Chuba Hubbard scored to put the Cowboys up 10-7 early in the fourth. The Golden Hurricane marched down the field, but they missed a chip shot field goal. And after another field goal to go up 13-7, the Cowboys managed to tack on one more for good measure to win an ugly opener 16-7. Despite a slowdown offense, Hubbard managed 93 yards on the ground, and wide receiver, star wideout at Oklahoma State, Tylan Wallace racked up 94 yards on 4 receptions. Rob, from what I saw, the Tulsa defense played with some swagger, particularly the DBs. They weren't shy of mouthing off. I saw Wallace getting the face a couple of defensive backs a couple times. But they challenged Oklahoma State at the line of scrimmage. They held a normally potent Cowboys offense to 136 yards passing. Should this be a cause for concern for the Cowboys, or did Tulsa just play well?
I think a little bit of both, if you ask me, Nick. I think Tulsa played really, really well, especially in the trenches, especially in that D line. I think one of the game plans for Tulsa coming into the game was, kind of stacking the box and, putting the emphasis on stopping Chuba Hubbard on the ground. But once again, Spencer Sanders left the game earlier in the game, and that made the OU offense take a hit. So I think, Tulsa played really well, but without Spencer Sanders at the helm, to run that offense, teams definitely going to try to stack the box and make the quarterback beat them. And I think, Tylan Wallace came up with some big plays later in that game to kind of, give them a little breathing room. But for the most part, Tulsa stuck in there, and Oklahoma State really didn't look like, the high-scoring offense that we thought we were going to see this year.
Yeah, this one really surprised me. Let's see if they were just sleepwalking through an opener. Could be a sloppy opening game in a season where we don't have a lot of preseason. I think it's going to affect all these teams a little bit differently. But hashtag P6 to all the AAC fans out there. Speaking of the American, number 13 Cincinnati, 55, Austin P20. Bearcats roll. Another American Athletic Conference team headed up to Atlanta, the UCF Knights. On the scoreboard, it looked ugly. 49-21, just rolled over Georgia Tech. But if you watch the game, Georgia Tech was hanging around. They made a few mistakes, but they come out quickly after a big kickoff from who I believe is going to be a future star, running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Quarterback Jeff Sims followed it up with a quick TD. And really, I think it was good that they sent a message early how they would respond after last week's upset over Florida State. Sims really flashed in this game like he did last week at times, but you saw him be a freshman a couple times. He made a few key mistakes. Unfortunately, you can't do that against UCF. Their offense is on a different level than Seminoles, which is crazy to say out loud. But, I mean, I think it's been that way for a few years, so we can admit that. They've probably had the best offense in the state for several years, but I think the Gators would challenge them for that title now, and we'll get to Miami in a minute too. But Dylan Gabriel threw for 417 yards, 4 TDs. But UCF scored in spurts. There were moments where Georgia Tech's defense had stretches of success, and I think that should be encouraging to Yellow Jackets fans. The Knights were shut down in their first 5 drives of the second half, for example, and then they poured on 3 touchdowns late to make it look like an ugly blowout. But I think that was interesting with this is UCF came in with expectations. Hey, you're set. Even though this team just beat Florida State last week, you're still a 7.5-point favorite. So I think the little guy story is over for UCF. I think they're getting that respect they deserve as a very solid football program. They covered the 7 with no problem, but I think it's extra impressive to consider when the Knights are down 10 players that opted out. Rob, UCF looked good as usual, but I like what Georgia Tech is building. What are your thoughts on Sims and Gibbs and what Collins is building at Georgia Tech?
Yeah, that backfield can be one of the most, electrifying backfields moving forward in the next couple of years. I know Jahmyr Gibbs coming out of high school, top prospect. A lot of SEC schools was definitely looking into him. And he went with Georgia Tech and he signed with that. And then you have Jeff Sims, who's the quarterback. Just like you mentioned before, he had a pretty good game last week against Florida State. He had somewhat of a good game this week against UCF. But once again, those freshman mistakes, I think he's going to overcome those. And with a talent like Gibbs in the backfield, I think Georgia Tech can really make some noise in the ACC moving forward. But once again, just like you said, I think UCF has really shedded that underdog, role, especially over the last couple of years. I think, from a national perspective, they're getting a little bit more respect. I know, they said they wanted Bama the year that they said they was the national champs, quote unquote. So I think that put a lot of people on the UCF radar. But moving forward, I think UCF is one of those, the teams that's going to be in the college playoff picture year in and year out. But I do like what Jeff Collins is doing at Georgia Tech, Nick. And I think, those young freshmen from the quarterback and the running back in the backfield, I think that's a great tandem moving forward for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Gibbs. The announcers, Greg McElroy and Joe Tessitore, they were saying Jeff Collins kept calling him Reggie Bush. I'm not going to go with the Reggie Bush comparison just yet, but he looks like he can be special. And I know that when I have a chance to watch Georgia Tech this year with Sims and Gibbs, I'm going to be flipping the jackets on a lot more than I have in the past. I think what Collins is building something special there, and you got a long way to go before you catch Clemson, but there's not a long way to get into that next echelon. Like, I think we're looking at Georgia Tech. Maybe they're a year or two behind what Mac Brown's doing at North Carolina right now. But I think the Jackets are going to be a tough out in the ACC over the next couple of years, especially as Sims develops. I think I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're building. UCF, they were supposed to have a season opener hosting North Carolina on a Friday night. Too bad that game was canceled, man.
Yeah. But I just want to go back into the Georgia Tech UCF game. One thing that didn't help Georgia Tech was those 5 turnovers either, Nick. So I think that's one thing that they can go back to the drawing board and kind of clean up and watch some film and said, hey, we gave the ball away too much. And that's, you can never really win a game when you're giving the ball away, especially 5 times. So I think that was another thing that, kind of separated UCF and Georgia Tech this past Saturday. Just a turnover game. UCF won that, and they put points up on the board after getting the ball back. So you can never win like that. And I think, once again, the freshmen, they made freshman mistakes, but I think they cleaned that up in the next year or two, and they come out and actually, put a solid team together on the Jeff Collins. So I really like Georgia Tech moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're looking at 2 high-level NFL prospects in Jeff Sims and Jamar Gibbs. So good level, base level to build from in Atlanta, or as the field says, the ATL. So I like what Collins done. Good rebranding at Georgia Tech. He's making it cool. All right, let's stay in the ACC. Miami, the Hurricanes make a trip up to Louisville. This is what a Miami offense should look like. They had explosive plays on the ground, through the air. Derek King throws for 325 yards on only 18 completions. Rob, the Canes were just on fire last night, making play after play.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't want to get into that, group of saying that, the U is back, because once again, we have to see more. But hell of a performance for Miami, especially being on the national spotlight. This was definitely the game of the week. Two quarterbacks dueling it out. You have big time prospects on both sides of the ball with Louisville and Miami. And I think De'Aaron King just kind of shows you, the type of player that he was a couple years ago at Houston, where he can beat you with his legs and he can beat you with his arm. And I love Miami open up the playbook and getting the ball to their weapons on the outside. But one of the things that I was definitely tuning in to see was that turnover chain 4.0, and it made an appearance with the Al Blaze interception. So once again, Miami definitely has the swagger, but let's just see if they can, rack up the wins moving forward to kind of, keep the swagger and keep the wins together so they can actually come back and be the U of O. But I'm not there yet to crown them the U of O or to say the U is back, Nick.
Well, yeah, it's going to take time to earn that, but how many of these 50-50 games has Miami dropped over the last decade? I mean, this is exactly the type of game they show up flat for and get crushed the last few years. But instead, they race out to a 26 lead in the first half, 20-6 lead in the first half. Louisville comes out of the locker room, hits on a few big plays, cuts the lead to 20-13. But the Canes, they answer right back. 75-yard touchdown run from Cameron Harris on the first play of the drive. Harris only had 9 carries, Rob. 3 of them went for 18, 38 in that 75-yard TD run. So he's breaking out some big runs like he did the week before against UAB. Malik Cunningham, no stranger to big plays, takes the Cards right back down the field. He went over 300-yard mark passing on the night. But the Hurricanes, once again, followed up a Louisville touchdown with a 75-yard strike from King to Jalen Knighton for a TD on the first play of the drive. So, I mean, that type of explosive playmaking has been lacking from Miami offense since forever. I mean, it's awesome to see that they have some firepower because, Manny can put together enough defense. I mean, even I say enough because Louisville still ends up putting up 34 points, but it's like anytime they remotely got close, Miami had an answer. I thought that was a great sign for Hurricanes fans. And heading into the Florida State game, you got to think Miami's going to be a big favorite. I think I heard from my buddy who's a Canes fan, Miami's an early 9.5-point favorite in that game. Got to think that's going to be a pretty easy cover for Miami based on what we saw from Florida State. But if King in the offense put together another solid performance against a good Florida State defense, do you think we'll see some hype heading into their matchup with Clemson on October 10th?
I think we will, and one of the reasons why I think so is because once again we talk about the prospects that you have on the Miami side of the ball. We talked about De'Aaron King, but we haven't really mentioned Brevin Jordan's name. That Louisville game, he had 10 receptions for 171 yards and 2 TDs. So I think once you have those playmakers on the outside that Miami has been missing the last couple seasons, I think once you can get those guys rolling, Miami can. They should be able to play with anyone in the NCAA, whether they win the game or whether they lose. It should be a competitive game, just based on the talent that they have. So I think this is a big win in the Manny Diaz era, and I think they can rack up a couple more wins and heading into that Clemson matchup later on in the year.
Yeah, I think it's really key. The first sign to coming back is just win these 50-50 games. Win these. These are a huge sign of how the program's going. I think last year Miami dropped the ball in a lot of these situations. This year they take care of business, but Miami's had some good performances here and there over the last few years. Like they can put together a game, but can they string it back to back? You'd like to see the offense come out and put together another good performance at home against Florida State next week. Definitely looking forward to it. Last question about the Hurricanes, Rob. Does Rhett Lashley, the offensive coordinator down in Miami, of course, he comes over from SMU and he worked with Gus Malzahn at Auburn for a few years. Do you think it's time for him to get considered for a head coaching job if Miami continues at this pace?
I think so. But once again, we talk about Miami putting a string of games together and being consistent. So in regards to Lashley getting a job moving forward, I would just like to see a little bit more and see how he uses De'Aaron King and the weapons that King has around him. But once again, we know his pedigree. We know he wants to open up the playbook on the offense side of the ball, and he want to take advantage of the mismatches. So I just want to see that on a consistent basis. But I think he's a hell of an OC, and he definitely should get head coaching consideration moving forward.
I think we'll see that from him. It's a great start for this offense, and I mean, UAB is a tough team too. Out of Conference USA, they're not a pushover. They're not a pushover. So this was two tough games to open with Miami, and they I think they flashed on offense a good bit. Looking forward to seeing what they can do against Florida State next week, though. But Rhett Lashley will be on the head coaching radar if Miami can keep up definitely if they keep up at this pace. But it's like we said, let's see some consistency. Looking forward to that game next week. All right, the Raging Cajuns. Man, speaking of consistency, they did not bring it against Georgia State the way they brought it against Iowa State last week. Of course, this Georgia State team, they're no stranger to upsets. They knocked off Tennessee and Rocky Top last year to open the season, and it's a fellow Sun Belt member. So the Raging Cajuns, they fell behind 14-0 in the second quarter thanks to several big plays by the Panthers. But they kind of sleptwalked through the first half, Robert. Levi Lewis made some big plays, the quarterback out of ULL. But they don't get on the scoreboard till late in the half, which I think was a key drive right before halftime. And they really kind of struggle into the third quarter with this one. Were you surprised to see them have such a hard time with Georgia State?
I wasn't. I think this was more so of a hangover from that Iowa State win the week before.
Yeah.
And just like you said, I really think they –
even though this is a 7-win team, Georgia State's a 7-win team that went to a bowl game and beat Tennessee last year. You still think they were a little bit overlooking this one?
I not necessarily overlook. I think Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns knew their opponent, but once again, going into Iowa State and upsetting Iowa State the way they did the week before, I think they were riding that high, and I think really they kind of went through the motions in the first half, and they kind of just walked through it, and then they kind of woke up in the second half, but by that time they were really in a dogfight, so they really had to play a perfect second half to come out with the win, and I think they did that.
Well, they can thank Elijah Mitchell for a couple of big runs at the end of the third and beginning of the fourth to put them up 28-21. But Georgia State did answer back with a clutch 15-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to tie things up 28-all to send it into overtime. Louisiana ends up holding Georgia State to a field goal, gets a TD in OT, survives and advances. And you know what? That's what college football is sometimes. You just got to survive and advance, right?
Yeah, I mean, no one says you have to win pretty every week, and I think that's what Louisiana Raging Cajuns kind of told us. Says, hey, as long as we get the win, so that right now they're 2-0. So I think any coach in college football would love to be 2-0 right now. So you tip your hats off to Georgia State fighting and having a good game, but once again the Raging Cajuns come out on top at the end of the game.
Well, 2-0 Marshall Thundering Herd hosted the Appalachian State Mountaineers, and Marshall comes away with a 17-7 victory. I like this matchup. This is good. This is a good, group of five matchup. I'd love to see these two teams play more often. But we had a defensive battle on our hands in Huntington, Rob. After the early Marshall TD drive, Appalachian State responds with a ridiculously good over-the-shoulder grab in the end zone near the sideline. I mean, the guy, unbelievable catch. If you haven't seen, if any of our listeners haven't seen this catch by the Appalachian State receiver, go check it out. Absolutely great catch over. He has to look. It's Willie May style on the end, on the sideline right near the end zone. Great catch to tie things up at 7. Thundering Herd were up 10-7 at the half. They hit on a huge reception later in the third that set up an easy TD run from the QB. But Appalachian State, they got back in it. They were driving early in the fourth. They completed a wide open pass to a tight end to get into Marshall territory. He takes off for the end zone, and he was tracked down by a Thundering Herd defensive player who punches the ball out near the goal line. It rolls into the end zone. Marshall recovers, and really App State, they would later miss a chip shot field goal, and they kind of kept it close, but the Marshall defense just kept making plays to kind of control the game. They hold on to get the 17-7 win. Robert, we're not used to seeing Appalachian State make these kind of mistakes. Big win for the Thundering Herd, though.
Once again, we talked about the turnover in the red zone. You talked about it earlier, Nick, with the script punch. We call that the peanut punch. Peanut Tillman from the Bears. And once again, I think Marshall gets the win, but I think Appalachian State kind of blew the game, if you ask me.
Now, this is one I did not get to watch this from start to finish. I read up on it, watched the highlights, did my homework on it, but I kept flipping over. I kept being surprised. Like I would flip in for a part of a drive here or there, and I was just surprised the offense got shut down. That Marshall defense really did some work.
Yeah, I think that Marshall team came in very well prepared. And once again, we can kind of talk about the same scenario with the Raging Cajuns as far as, getting a big win a week before and coming in and kind of sleepwalking and kind of letting the game get away from you. But I think one of the key points in that game was definitely the turnover in the red zone, where we see the Marshall defender punch the ball out. I think in that scenario, you really don't concern yourself with trying to score. You concern yourself with just trying to put two hands on the ball and being secure. And we didn't see that. And I think that kind of gave Marshall the momentum to kind of pull that game out.
Yeah, big win for Doc Holliday. Good for Marshall. A little bit surprised at this result, though. I really thought Appalachian State was going to go up to Huntington and take care of business. All right, the number 25 Pitt Panthers were a 3-touchdown favorite at home against Syracuse. I didn't like that line. It seemed a little much for the Pitt offense to handle. I'm glad I took Syracuse in the points in this one as Pitt wins 21-10. We don't need to go too deep into this game, Robert. It was something I watched a lot of the first half. There wasn't a lot of action. Pitt really controlled this game for most of the time, but you had one big play. Backup quarterback Rex Culpepper comes in the game after Syracuse quarterback Tommy DeVito leaves with an injury. Syracuse hits on a big-time pass before the half, but they were totally shut down in the second half on offense. But it's another game where the Orange were very clearly outmatched. But Dino Babers is going to ensure that they're not going to be pushovers. Pitt really earned this win. So I think Syracuse, they might be down from where they've been the last few years under Babers, but anytime Babers is on that sideline, you got to know Syracuse is going to be fighting pretty hard.
Yeah. Once again, we had previous conversation about the acumen that Dino Babers has as a coach. I love Dino Babers as a coach. I think we don't talk enough about Dino Babers when it comes to the top coaches in the nation. I think he's always going to keep his team in there. He doesn't work with the best of the talent that a lot of these other coaches have at their disposal, but he makes it work. He's kind of almost kind of like that D'Antoni with the Michigan State, where they do more with less. So, but I know Syracuse is definitely not getting the quality of players of a Michigan State. But once again, just Dino Babers and his coaching style and his the chemistry of his team. I think he's always going to keep his team in there. But I would be remiss to not mention, Rex Culpepper, the backup quarterback who returned from his, cancer diagnosis to throw a touchdown. I think that was one of the most, intriguing points of the weekend for me. I thought that was a surreal moment where, his team just rallied around him in a huge celebration after he throws that touchdown pass.
Yeah, that's a great story. And, you got to love the flow, too. He's giving Trevor Lawrence a run for his money with that hair.
Yeah, he definitely is. He definitely is. I think we're gonna get in our football segment, but I don't know, Nick. Like who do you think has the better hair between those guys? Trevor Lawrence. You got Rex Culpepper, and we had Chase Winovich tonight with the New England Patriots. That's a lot of hair out there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's they were making Lawrence comparisons after that TD throw on the broadcast. I thought that was pretty funny. So, all right, well let's move on. This game was kind of, even though that was a good moment with Culpepper, that game was a little bit of a snoozer. I was really dialed into this game, which I thought was the best game of the day. Navy and Tulane. To me, this is easily the best game of the day. Navy looked horrific in the first half. Tulane streaks out to a 24-0 lead, and it looks like it's going to be the disaster we saw against BYU. But the Middies, they flipped the script in the second half. You tuned in the third quarter, and the whole stadium had a power outage, so the play-by-play was being done by the guys back at the studio. They were helping out, and they finally got the broadcast back on track. But at that point, the momentum had totally flipped. Quarterback Dalen Morris, he hit on some big passes. He's pretty inconsistent in general as a passer, but Navy, they just run those routes that some of them are just so open. You just got to lob the ball, and the guy's there. I think they hit on a couple of big pass plays. They finally hit on, like, I think he finally started getting his confidence once they hit on it. And fullback Jamel Carruthers came alive in the second half, ends up finishing with 125 rush yards. The 24-0 lead melted throughout the second half, and Navy kicks a game-winning field goal as time expired to secure the largest comeback victory in school history, which is pretty incredible when you think about the history of Navy football. Rob, what I'm finding with Tulane after watching their comeback against South Alabama last week is they like to make things interesting, but I thought it was encouraging that we saw Navy look like Navy again in the second half.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about it, Nick. Tulane definitely loves to make it interesting. But just like you mentioned, I think, this game was the tale of two halves. Just like you said, Navy was horrendous in the first half, and then they come stomping back in the second half, with 27 unanswered points to get the win. But let's just go back into the first half. Navy ran only 2 plays in Tulane territory in the first half, Nick.
Oof.
The whole first half. That is, that's horrendous. And I know that the week before, a lot of people was out on Navy because, the head coach talked about, being in the pandemic and COVID with everything. They really didn't have a lot of live action when it came to tackling. So they kind of paid that price in week 1. But week 2, it seemed like they kind of got their bearings under them, and they really fought in that second half to come out with the win. And it was very impressive comeback victory.
Well, yeah, big credit to Navy, especially after you lose 55-3 against BYU and then fall behind 24-0. I think, obviously, not that we need to question the character of midshipmen at the Naval Academy, but really shows this group will never quit. I thought that was an awesome comeback to watch. They really clamped down. That Tulane rushing attack was crushing them in the first half. They really clamped down. They started tackling well. And just the offense, the fullback, really they started getting Carruthers involved. And that Navy offense, the fullback's really the key. If that fullback's going strong, it opens up the sweeps to the outside. It opens up the linebackers to step up, and you can do some play action, hit the big passes. The fullback got going in the second half, and that Navy looked almost unstoppable. So great win by Navy, crushing defeat by Tulane. Both those teams feel like they should have won that walking out. And, hey, Tulane, you just did it to South Alabama last week, so here's a taste of your own medicine. But good for Navy for getting back on track in what was easily the best game of the day. All right, you had Liberty going to Western Kentucky, beat the Hilltoppers 30-24. Stephen F. Austin beat Texas San Antonio 24-10. Troy beat Middle Tennessee State 47-14. Would have thought that one would have been a little more of a contest going into it. SMU puts up 65 against North Texas 35. Boston College and Duke, Rob, BC 26-6 in Jeff Hafley's debut. I said before that I didn't have a good lean because I didn't have a good feel for what BC was going to be. I suspected they would play solid defense under Jeff Hafley, who comes over after one season as defensive coordinator at Ohio State. But I did expect a little more out of the Duke offense than we got. I mean, this was a good defensive performance by Boston College. They really shut down the Duke offense that played okay at Notre Dame. But once BC figured it out on the offensive side of the ball, it really turned into a dominant win. Good first outing for Hafley in this one.
Yeah. Once again, we talked about this game earlier in the week, and we really couldn't get a baseline on it. But I kind of went with Duke because, they had a game underneath their belt the week before. And I thought Duke would kind of pull this one out. But just seeing that Boston College offense, it definitely looks like it's a new offense under Hafley. So I'm excited to see, that Boston College offense moving forward. But once again, I think this was more so this game was more so on Duke and what Duke did not do. They really didn't show up, especially on the offense side of the ball, as much. And I think, Boston College really has some, dynamic players outside of the quarterback position that, can, make some noise in the ACC. But once again, I think this was more so an indication of what Duke is not, more so what a Boston College is. But once again, I really thought Duke would get the win, but they kind of let me down, Nick.
Yeah, I know BC still had a little bit of talent left over from those Adazio days. They had a couple rough seasons there at the end, but they were always pretty competitive. So, I mean, you expect BC and Duke to fight in a lot of games, but two well-coached football teams. Got a lot of respect for Cutcliffe at Duke, but it just seems like they were just outmatched in that second half. BC really took it to them. All right, wrapping up the college football schedule, Louisiana Tech defeats Southern Miss 31-30. Texas State 38, Louisiana Monroe 17. NC State in a shootout, 45-42 over Wake Forest. NC State finally gets on the field after some cancellation. Abilene Christian falls to UTEP 17-13 to wrap up college football. Rob, it's our last Saturday without the SEC. And as much as I enjoyed watching some different teams, it was fun to check out. I really had a lot of fun watching New Navy Tulane, but I need some SEC back in my life. I'm glad they're coming back next week.
Definitely. I can't wait. Once again, the SEC, one of the best conference in the nation, especially one of the best conferences of the Power Five. I know everyone is chomping at the bits to kind of watch some SEC football. And one game I'm definitely going to be tuned in to watch is that, Florida versus Ole Miss game. I think that's a key matchup that can have, some national championship implications depending on how Florida comes out and, put on the show in that game and see how it looks from an offense perspective, defense perspective. So shall see. But once again, I'm very excited.
Yeah, you got Mike Leach going to LSU. I mean, there's just gonna be a lot of good games on the schedule next week. But it was fun having It's fun having football back, obviously. But it was cool being able to do some deeper dives on some of these other conferences the last couple of weeks. So there's not a lot of Saturdays where I would tune in to watch Louisiana play Georgia State. So interesting. We're getting a little more depth right now to our college football fandom. And but we will welcome the SEC back with open arms next week. All right, that wraps up our college football week in review. Rob, you got any final thoughts?
Once again, I think the SEC is coming back, Nick, and just like we said, we're super excited to see what unfolds and who's going to be the movers and shakers. Is it going to be Alabama? Is LSU going to, run the table and bounce back with their national championship season that they had last year? So I'm just super excited and just wait to see, the first week of SEC football, Nick.
Same here, man. Same here. Can't wait. One more week. All right. So we're going to wrap up this episode in the college edition. We decided after the first episode, we went pretty long reviewing all the games. So we are going to split the college football and NFL episodes up so that the NFL and college fans don't have to chase down the content they want, and we'll just deliver both separately. Well, as per usual for every episode of American Football Stories, we will wrap up with a Did You Know question where Robert and I will compete, and we do track it on our website at AmericanFootballStories.com. We like to tie it into the subject of the podcast in honor of Navy's great comeback win over Tulane. I'm going to ask Robert a question, and it's not a nice question, Robert, so I just want to give you a heads up on that.
Okay.
But last week during our podcast recording, I struggled saying the name Ken Niumatalolo, the Navy head coach. I knew his name. I've known his name for a long time, but I realized, I just don't say it out loud in conversation a whole lot, and I had to stop the podcast, go look back how to say it. So, Rob, before we start, I want you to give us your best pronunciation of that last name for us, the Navy head coach.
Navy head coach great win. I know had a crushing loss week 1 against BYU. But once again, we're going to pronounce that name, head coach Ken Niumatalolo.
Niumatalolo.
Montalolo. There we go.
Niumatalolo.
There
All
we
right.
go.
All right. So here's the question of the week. Here's the did you know question, Rob. You know how to say it now, right? You know how to say it. I need you.
Niumatalolo.
Right. So the did you know question of the episode is, how do you spell Niumatalolo?
Oof.
Oof.
All right. Wow. So we're gonna have to enunciate this thing, Nick.
All right. Well, we're gonna do that after the commercial break. So we'll be back.
After commercial break.
We will be back. American Football Stories is brought to you by CoachPaint. CoachPaint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game today with CoachPaint. All right, Rob, we are back. We were discussing the Navy head coach. In honor of me struggling to say his name last week on the podcast, I'm asking you a cruel question. Ken Niumatalolo is the head coach of the Navy midshipmen. Great win, great comeback at Tulane by Coach Niumatalolo's troops. But Rob, you know his name. We know how to say his name. But I'm asking you the mean question of how to spell his name.
Well, I tell you this, Nick. I haven't won many spelling bees throughout my years of life. But once again, we're going to give a crack at it. That's what we're doing. We are keeping score.
Are you telling me that people don't butcher your name, Robert Parker?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
No, nobody has trouble with that.
No one has trouble with that at all.
Well, yeah, my name's Nick Knudsen, Knudsen. So that's good luck going through life. Once I can guarantee you, Coach Niumatalolo is used to people mispronouncing and misspelling his name. As Nick Knudsen, I can almost assure you, as someone with a complicated last name, that is the case in his life. So I think he'll understand. I think he'd understand if you can't get this. But let's hear it. For 1 point, Robert. Niumatalolo.
Okay. All right.
You want to ask spelling bee questions?
We're gonna go Niumatalolo. So I'm gonna go N-I. Okay.
Ding ding.
U-M.
Okay.
A-T.
Okay.
L-O-L-O.
Oh, man, you missed the A. You missed the A after the T.
Oh.
Niumatalolo. You just missed that second A. You're very close. I'm very impressed with the effort. I thought you were going to get tripped up at the beginning. That beginning Nium. That's a tough one coming out the gate. And you got that. You nailed that. You just missed the A. At the end.
We missed the A, Coach. We're sorry about that, Coach. We're gonna get it next time.
We're gonna crush your name from now on. I'm gonna remember this name all over. But it's funny because obviously we've known who this guy is forever, but we're new to the podcasting world. You don't say things out loud sometimes. Sometimes I don't have a lot of deep conversations about Navy football with my friends. So I know who Coach Niumatalolo is. Don't bring him up a whole lot though. So, it is interesting. So, Rob, I apologize for the cruel question. You owed me one in that department. That's fair.
Yeah, we're definitely have some more spelling bees on coaches' names moving forward, Nick.
All right, man. You want to read us out?
Sure. So once again, just like my co-host Nick said earlier in the pod, we're going to start breaking, the college segment and the NFL segment up. So with that being said, I would just like to read us out and pay some bills. So to our audience out there, thanks for listening to American Football Stories. We are powered by Coach Paint. Please beef up your scouting clips with Coach Paint, and please follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, and rate us 5 stars, and tune in to next week's episode.